Press Repeat. We're back for another video. It is week 14, and now we're talking about camera and set dressing. It's super important that you compose the shots to show the best parts of your scenes. Without set dressing, it's like when you have a painting without a frame. Sometimes the frame is even better than the painting. So that's what we're going to try to do, is set, dress, put the camera in places that make our models, our environments, the best that it could look. So jumping right into it, we are looking at the scene as I have it. So this is my first camera position, and just to remind everyone how to make a camera, you go over here on the right side here, select on camera and click physical, and then you click and drag it onto the perspective window, and then that generates the camera. From there you can generate and look through the camera, going under physical camera and clicking onto the camera. So there's camera 2. You should not make more than one camera because it's going to be a little confusing. Instead, you'll use the timeline to position the camera. So now, since we're talking about camera, let's just go ahead right into it and remind ourselves how to set the keyframes for the camera. So I'm just going to select the camera and make sure it's set to key, and we can set the keys. We can set it to auto keyframe as well, so that every time we do move it, it'll do that, but it can get a little sloppy. So I've already, just make sure, set the key, and I will move to the second or first frame in this case, and I can move the camera, and let's say we want to see inside the garage maybe, so we can also select the aim. So the target, sometimes easier to use the Scene Explorer to grab the target, and we can then position it. So this could be our, again, hypothetically, our second camera position, and then I'll turn on and set the key. You can see then the keys, and we can switch between the frames. This is how we're going to set dress, because we're going to use the camera and animate the camera, and then that way we can scrub through. The only thing that we can't animate is the HDR light itself. So if you remember from the previous video, we go into the texture editor and modify the coordinates to rotate the light position of the HDR image. But anyways, we've got the first 2 images that we want. We need to also animate the target. So the target also needs to have keyframes, so I'm going to set the key there, and then go back to this frame 0 and set the key there. So just a minor thing, and then make sure you set the key. That we do have our 2 positions now. Looking good. So now let's talk about the actual set dressing. What do we mean by set dressing? Well, we're talking about the images, or we're talking about the models around the main focus. In this case, the main focus is our building, and the other things, the props, we'll say, the set is everything else. The trees, the light poles, probably some benches would have been good here, maybe some cars in the scene. Right now we have 4 palm trees, these date trees, and as you can see here, this date tree is not even visible in the shot, and especially in this first shot. So I'm going to just go ahead and select it, use the Scene Explorer, have it selected, and because of this first shot not seeing it, it's really pointless that it's even there. So I'm going to set the key for it on this first frame and then just position it somewhere where we can see it. So maybe something like that, and now it's visible in the shot. Wonderful. Another example would be with this light pole. I'm going to make sure I'm using the Scene Explorer, and I'm just going to duplicate it as an instance, and there it is. And I can now position this and move it in a place, again, that's going to work in terms of the composition of the entire shot. So right now it's blocking the date tree. You can either put it forward or behind, but this type of overlapping looks pretty good. Again, you don't want to make it look too busy, but you do want to make it interesting. So this idea of foreshortening and putting objects in front and the foreground adds depth to that image. So maybe something like this could work, but then again, you want to make sure it's recognizable in the shot. So right now it looks somewhat recognizable. Here looks like it could be maybe too busy. I'm going to go in between and put it right there, so we have the idea of the light pole there. And so now again, I will keyframe this, and so we have that shot more or less done. Now let's move to the second shot, and I will set dress this one. I'm going to select that same light pole, and I'm on the new frame. I'm going to put that light pole over in front of the entrance, set the key, and I may just grab this one here too on the right hand side. I'm going to also set the key there, and go back to frame 1 and set the key there. So that way it records its other position, and I can put that there. So now I have 2 light poles in front, and just to make sure those light poles go back. Okay, so from there we could put these date trees in the background in here. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab one of these. This one again needs to be keyframed, so going back to from frame 0 and then go to frame 1 and pull this date tree to the back behind. Again, we're making the scene look a little bit more lush, more realistic, and then from here we can start to render. Now again, if your HDR images needs to be changed in terms of lighting, then you'll need to do this manually. Otherwise, you could go in to the render settings and then set the frame render count to the number of shots that you have. So the minimum is 5, so we can go from frames 1 or 0 through 4 here. So that would be the frames. We can set the range, might be even easier. Set the range here, and then you can let it render. Make sure again it's 1920 by 1080, that's the minimum. But just to show how this will look, we want to render the view. It's going to be our physical camera. Do a quick render. For now we'll just keep it single, but we can see how the render looks. It looks like a blue evening scene, and then that's how we are set dressing. Again, I highly encourage you to have the scene lit by the light poles and the moon and the nighttime, and then also have another version where it's lit by the sun, so you have 2 different versions. Understand the idea of color, how in the evening it's going to be more blue, obviously a little bit darker, but definitely a lot more blue, versus during the daytime, whether it's in the morning or the sunset, it's going to be either yellow in the morning, a little bit more red in the evening, and the light position of that sun is also going to play onto the shadows. That's all I've got. Professor Pete, keep learning. See you in the next one.